Hi everybody, happy Friday. Today our assistant instructor Landon is giving a lecture. Some of you may know him from discussions, if not, class meet Landon Porter.
Hi.
No class.
The display isn't on. Do you know how to...
There we
Oh,
go.
it's blinked. Got it. That's what you're mentioning. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Hey guys. As Ruth was saying, some of you probably recognize me from discussion. I have a number of students this semester, as well as last semester. I was a TA for Ruth, so some of you might recognize me from before. But yeah, I'm a PhD student in the biology department. As I said when I was introducing myself the first day of class, I do research with cichlids on the evolution of social behavior. So I think evolution is a really cool process for obvious reasons. So it is my pleasure today to be talking to you about evolutionary mechanisms, specifically natural selection, genetic drift, and gene flow. Here is just like the title slide. I did my best to pick what I think is like a nice representation of the diversity of life on this planet. Of course, this is only a small snippet of which, but yeah, hopefully we can appreciate the beauty in that. Okay, so these are your learning outcomes. As you guys know, these kind of provide a roadmap about what we're going to be talking about today and the goals that we have for you. By the end of the lecture, you should be able to provide examples of different selective pressures and how they affect evolutionary fitness, despite, as we'll see, in some cases, even reducing individual survivability, which is kind of interesting. Also, you should be able to describe anisogamy and analyze how differences in gamete size create distinct selective pressures on males and females, which in turn shapes their reproductive strategies and behaviors. Finally, we're going to talk about allele frequencies in small populations that are predominantly affected by genetic drift. And we're also going to make the distinction between genetic drift and gene flow. So maybe clarify some things with that. Bless you. Does anyone know who this is? Charles Darwin, yeah, Avi. I couldn't do this without at least giving like a head nod to the guy. We really do owe him a lot, right? Some of his ideas, have been built upon and maybe like changed a little bit, but fundamentally, right, the idea of evolution by natural selection was his brainchild. So here's a quote from Darwin. It says, "Whilst this planet has gone circling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved." I think it's a nice quote. Certainly true, as we'll see. So I want to begin by talking about evolution by natural selection. What is selection? You guys have encountered these terms before. Ruth introduced them the other day. But just before we transition into new topics, I just want to do like a little recap so we're all on the same page. Natural selection acts on individuals. If there is a difference in fitness, natural selection can change allele frequencies in a population over time. So what do we mean by fitness? In the context of evolution, fitness is defined as the ability of an individual to survive and transmit genes to the next generation. This is measured by an individual's contribution to the gene pool relative to others in their population. What does that look like? Here I have like a little cartoon of these beetles. The one on the left that's green has lower fitness. The one on the right has higher Darwinian fitness or evolutionary fitness. Why is that? It's not because this beetle is faster or stronger or, some of these ideas that we colloquially associate with the word fitness, but rather simply because this green beetle produced less offspring than the brown one. So by the third generation, we see that the relative contribution to the offspring is higher from this individual than this one. So it's a measure of reproductive success, not exercise or strength, even though that may correlate. Natural selection works because individuals whose reproductive fitness is higher become the parents of the next generation and contribute more copies of their genes. But why is there a difference in fitness? Saying fitness this, fitness that, okay, cool. But why? Why do some things have a higher fitness than others? Well, kind of zooming out here, taking a bird's eye view of this process. So first and foremost, there has to be some sort of genetic basis on which natural selection can take effect. So this is originally due to random mutation in the DNA. You might remember from last semester when we were talking about DNA replication and polymerase and all of these things. Polymerase is pretty good, right? One mistake in every 10,000 base pairs, but it's not perfect, right? It's not infallible. And we kind of owe our existence to the fact that polymerase makes mistakes and that mutations happen. Because in a given environment, individuals with certain traits or mutations have greater reproductive fitness because they have more offspring. What does that look like? Again, continuing with this beetle example, we have some brown ones and some green ones here, if you can see my cursor. And then a bird comes along and selectively chooses, right, to eat the green beetles, maybe because they're easier to see against the brown background. So over time, what that results in is that because of the greater reproductive success of individuals with a specific trait, more copies of their allele are contributed to the next generation. So we see in this diagram here, some of these are heterozygotes, right, with the green allele. Maybe one guy has the green allele as opposed to 3 when we started out. So, right, over time, we're going to see that the frequency of this green allele is going to get less and less, and maybe it'll even go to extinction. So as a result, of this selection, there's a change in allele frequencies in the population over time. We refer to this as microevolution. Okay. So here's a warm-up and simple question for you guys. Why must a population have some genetic variability in order for evolution by natural selection to work? So I'll take a couple minutes, read over the choices, and enter your answer. Okay, maybe like 10 more seconds. Go ahead and enter your answer, and we'll talk about it. Okay, go ahead and close it. Yeah. Okay, so does anyone want to say what they put or what they thought the correct answer was? Any brave volunteers? Yeah. D, yeah, you're correct. So selection can have different effects on individuals with different genetic-based traits. These other answer choices, I would probably approach this with just process of elimination. So because selection has a greater effect in small populations, we haven't talked about differences in population size and how that affects this. We will, but that's not true. Because the direction of selection can change in different environments. That's totally true, right? But it doesn't really have to do with why we need genetic variation in the first place. So yeah, the best answer for this one is D. Okay. Can you think of other selective pressures, we call these agents of selection, that would affect an organism's fitness other than just being eaten? Does anyone have an idea? Yeah.
Environmental pressures like temperature.
Yeah, temperature or any environmental variable, right? So maybe environmental pressures. Anything else you guys can think of? Yeah.
Access to resources like food and water.
Yeah, access to resources. I guess that would kind of be like environmental variables, maybe that changes like over time. Can anyone think of anything besides like aspects of the environment? It's okay if not, but I'm wondering if someone can guess what I'm. Yeah.
Maybe like something to do with like disease.
Disease, yeah, ability to be able to fight off diseases and stuff. And you're gonna say something else?
Like mating with
Yeah.
population and how to interact with other individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you guys are all right. And this isn't an exhaustive list by any means. I'm sure you can think of like many agents of selection. But yeah, someone said changing environmental factors, right? So an example of this would be the pocket mouse that we saw the other day. So, you know, if the background environment changes, the allele frequency can shift. We're going to talk about this guy in a second, but occupying a new niche. So it's kind of the same idea as environmental changes, but in this case, instead of the environment changing, it's like the organism goes to a different environment. Also, you can have what you said, exactly, competition. Within a species, individuals can compete for resources or access to food and water, or even access to mates. And that leads nicely to this one. You can also have mate choice. So between the sexes of a species, you can have agents of selection. So we'll talk about some examples of these. Starting with the kit fox. So these are two nice photos of kit foxes. The kit fox species is a small member of the dog family, Canidae. It's found in desert habitats of the Southwest. Has anyone seen one of these in real life? No? I'll be on the lookout for them, but I haven't seen one in real life. It might be around here though. So compared to its relative, the red fox, which probably if you've seen a fox, that's what it was. Certainly I have. The kit fox is more nocturnal. It's more brown in coloration, and it has distinctly larger ears. These guys are kind of like huge ears. So we're gonna do a practice problem. We're gonna together explain the evolution of large ears within the ancestral kit fox population by the process of natural selection. And we're gonna do that by putting the following steps in order. So this is a little exercise for you guys. You can work on them separately or in groups if you prefer. So the directions are: choose the steps that must have occurred for the kit foxes to evolve large ears by natural selection. Write those letters in the correct sequence of when they happened, and then put an X on the shapes that do not occur in this process. So you won't use all of these letters, some of them aren't applicable, but group those separately. So yeah, let's take maybe like 3 or so minutes to talk about this, and then we'll go over it as a class. Okay, maybe take like 30 more seconds and wrap up discussions. Okay guys, let's circle back and talk about these as a group. So does anyone want to say what their group thought or what they came up with for the answer to this? Anyone want to start? What's the first thing that we need in order for any of this to happen? I saw your hand first. Random mutation, yeah. So what letter is that? D. So you need a random mutation for big ears to occur in the ancestral kit fox population. Nice. What happens next? Okay, so we get a mutation, and then what? Anyone want to see what they did next? Anyone else? Yeah.
We put A that individuals with the kit fox for years they reproduce.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, A would be next. So once you have the mutation, individuals with that mutation and the associated phenotype of having large ears reproduced more in desert habitats. And then lastly, this one might be a little bit tricky, but what's the last step of this? So that occurs, and then over time we see, yeah, E, yeah. Alleles for big ears increase in frequency in the kit fox population in desert habitats. So that's correct, DAE. Some that aren't used, right, are these letters. I mean, we can talk about them individually. So kit foxes with larger ears had lower fitness in desert habitats. That might have well been true, but that doesn't help us, tell the story that we're going for here. C, a mutation for big ears in the ancestral kit fox was triggered by the desert habitat. Mutations are random. Right? They're not triggered by like a specific environment. Oh, this would be a good mutation to give it. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. F, individual kit foxes living in the desert habitat evolved big ears because they needed to. I mean, we need to be a little bit more nuanced, right? Not really good. And then G, they migrated into the desert habitats and grew bigger ears in their lifetime. I mean, probably their ears grew proportionally to their bodies, but that doesn't have anything to do with their habitat. So yeah, good job, guys. So yeah, that was, I guess, natural selection broadly, right? So we talked about predation and environmental factors influencing evolution by natural selection. But you can also have something called sexual selection. So what is that? Sexual selection is defined as a subset of natural selection where traits that increase mating success are favored, even if they reduce the survival of individuals. That's kind of maybe counterintuitive at first, because you're always used to hearing like survival of the fittest, right? Evolution, we gotta survive. Yeah, of course you need to survive, but you need to survive in order to do what? Just for the sake of surviving? No, you need to survive to be able to reproduce. So because of that, this emphasis on reproduction, you can have natural selection occurring between members of different sexes or within the same sex. So these are the, I guess, terms for that. We have inter versus intra-sexual selection. This is maybe reminiscent of the vocab that you guys had last semester when we talked about inter versus intramolecular forces. So don't let them, like the words scare you. Basically it's like, okay, selection within a sex, right? So intra is within and inter is between or across. So yeah, intrasexual selection is competition between individuals of the same sex, usually males, and they compete for access to mates. An example of this that you guys probably are familiar with are male white-tailed deer that use antlers to compete for mates during the mating season. They kind of like battle like this. Intersexual selection is when the selective pressure is being applied like across sexes, so between males and females. One sex, usually females, selects mates based on their preference for a certain trait. For example, female bird of paradise select for elaborate male mating displays, which is here. This is a male bird of paradise, that's the female looking at him, seeing if he was good enough. But why? Again, why? Why is there a difference in selection between males and females? Why don't the female deer grow antlers and start like competing for mates? Why doesn't the male bird of paradise say, you know what, I'm tired of doing all these displays, why don't you do it for once? And if that happened, the female would be like, okay, what's your problem? And just go find another male, right? It wouldn't work. But why? Why doesn't that work? Why don't we see that? It all relates back to this concept of anisogamy. So what is anisogamy? Anisogamy refers to the difference in gamete size between the sexes, right? So here's an image of a sperm and egg cell, sperm cells and an egg cell. You can see crazy difference in size, right? So egg cells actually, I think, are the largest cell in the human body, so much so that you can even see them with the naked eye if you look closely. Much larger than sperm cells. So males produce many small, mobile sperm that are easy to produce, they're cheap. Females, on the other hand, produce few, large, nutrient-rich eggs that are costly to produce. So I guess a little bit of like nod to meiosis here. So usually when I draw meiosis, it's in the context of chromosomes and all of these things. And I don't really pay attention to the size of the circles that I draw, but this time we're going to. So I don't know if that works. I'm gonna do it quicker. So we have a big cell. We start out, maybe this is spermatogenesis. And then it divides into two daughter cells, meiosis 1, and then these split into 4 cells, and you get 4 haploid cells for every 1 progenitor cell, right? This is meiosis. Well, it's a little bit different in the case of making eggs, because instead of the cytoplasm and the chromosomes and all of the ingredients dividing nice and evenly between these different cell lineages, what happens is you get actually a concentration. So this will be like small, and then this side, it's small. So first you have like the first initial concentration, and then these are even smaller, and then this, it's even bigger, right, as it divides into 2. So what you result in at the end is you have 3 of these things that are called polar bodies. They're discarded, they're not used. But then you have one really large gamete that took all of the resources from each round of this division. So that's kind of the mechanism behind this. How does this drive sexual selection? Well, because of this fundamental difference, males and females face different reproductive pressures, leading to the evolution of distinct mating strategies and sexual selection mechanisms. Sometimes sexual selection can be so strong that it overpowers other agents of selection or other selective pressures, like predation. What do I mean by that? So here is an example that I picked. It's kind of near and dear to our heart. This is a Tungra frog. Mike Ryan in my department has been researching these frogs for like 20 years. A lot is known about them. This is a male, and you can see that his chest is puffed out. If you look closely, you can see the ripples in the water. That's from him like calling. He's like screaming out loud as he can to attract, so the sound travels and attracts females that will be recruited to come mate with him. But if you call too loudly, you make yourself vulnerable. These frogs are preyed upon by these bats. And so if the male is just sitting there yelling, right? It's like, hey, bats, come eat me. They don't really care, right? I mean, of course they do, but in terms of selective pressures, the drive to call to females to maximize reproductive success kind of outweighs the risk of making myself vulnerable to predators. So that's kind of interesting. It's not always quite cut and dry, we gotta survive at all costs. So this is an example I wanna show you guys, if I can get to it, of where I think sexual selection is like kind of gone crazy.
He's doing a practice display, which these males do a lot again and again for the hopes of getting it right when the female is there. But notice where he pauses. He does this twitching and he's waggling. Now, if the female were there, the question is what would this really look like? So here's the view from above, looking down. And so Of course, we knew it was going to look different, right? So, you know, it wasn't too much of a stretch of the imagination to think that it wasn't going to look the same as it looked like from the ground view that we had been, you know, looking at for so many years. But I don't think we were quite prepared for how different it would look, even at this point. So he comes out, the female's looking at him, and it looks nothing at all like a ballerina dancer. And in fact, had we actually looked at this display from the perspective from which it had evolved, right? And that's the perspective of the female who's the chooser here in this. We probably would have called it the wobbling ovoid display or something like that, not the ballerina dance display. So let's just take a look at this again, because there's something even more remarkable than just the shape of that male from above. Here's two cameras that are synced. There's the wide one on your right and the female's view on the left. There's better light here, but no female there. But the question is what's going to happen when he does that head waggling thing? Well, there's this incredible flash of these iridescent feathers on his breast shield. And then what he does is he plunges his head down like this and his breast goes up. And it's very...
You can also see, if you look closely, let me back up for a second. I want to point this out too. In addition to having this like...
But the question is what's going to happen when he does that head waggling thing?
Pause. You see this little, like, they kind of discovered this by this video. They explain it, you know, as we go on. But yeah, there's like also iridescent feathers behind. This looks like just an oval, right? It doesn't even look like a bird. There's many species of these birds. Each of their displays is like more elaborate than the next. Collectively, they're called the bird of paradise. It's an extremely speciose clade. So yeah, I think that's a good example of sexual selection. So I made a meme for you guys. This was funny last night. How many of you guys are Star Wars fans? Yeah, some of you? Okay, so I mean, yeah, I like the medium old Star Wars, but I watched the new movies and they're okay. But yeah, so here on the right, we have a male bird of paradise. Looks like a pretty bird, right? Like he's got some yellow going on, his beak is blue. Intersexual selection is like, no, that's not good enough, we need more. So male birds of paradise do even more. Maybe you guys have seen like the Planet Earth documentary of like this specific species where the bird like is like doing all these like clicking sounds and like waving back and forth. Like you'd think that that's enough. No, intersexual selection is like, we need more out of the male birds of paradise. I feel bad for these guys, right? This one, it's like good luck escaping a predator or sneaking up on a tundra frog. Like you have so much of this extra plumage, it might actually affect your ability to survive, but it's so important for reproduction. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Why do females care? On an aside, is it just they think that extra feathers are pretty? Why would they, like, does anyone have an idea why the females would choose for this like outrageous colors and feathers and stuff? Any ideas? Yeah. Bingo, yeah. Female doesn't really necessarily care. She's only interested in what genes her offspring are gonna have. So one, if the male can afford to make all these expensive feathers and waste time every day practicing his dance moves, right? That's a pretty good indication that he has good genes. So it's an honest signal of like, I guess, viability. Really interesting. Let's do another instant poll. If you could open question number 2. Which of the following scenarios best illustrates the difference between intersexual selection and intrasexual selection? So read over these answer choices, and then maybe in a minute or two we'll talk about it. Okay, maybe take 10 more seconds or so, enter your answers. Yeah, I guess we can go ahead and close it. Okay, does anyone want to say what they thought was the correct answer for this one? What'd you guys put? Someone said D? Yeah, D is correct. So, I mean, some of these are maybe a little bit confusing. We don't have to go through all of them, but the best answer is D. Male peacocks displaying a vibrant tail to attract mates. That's intersexual selection. And then male elephant seals fight and battle for access to females. That's an example of intrasexual selection. So, good job. Any questions over selection? Selective pressures? Anything? Okay. So, selection, maybe you guys have heard this before, but selection occurs when there are large populations, right? That's when the effects of selection really can take hold. But in small populations, I mean really small populations especially, the effects of something else dominate evolution, right? So I'm referring to genetic drift. What is genetic drift exactly? So we define genetic drift as the random change in allele frequencies within a population due to chance events. So what exactly do I mean by that? You guys have probably seen in your simulation, right? Something that looks like this. So we see here, notice the population size is really large, and we get some variability in allele frequency. Reduce the population even more. We get a bunch of noise, I guess, that's added to the background. Maybe there's selection happening, but this noise, you get to 5 individuals, right? Super small population, and these alleles, like, it kind of looks crazy, right? The graphs like go to the top and go to the bottom like super quickly. Why does this happen? Like, what do I mean by, oh, it's just a probability of allele frequencies? What the heck does that even mean? Well, I have a mental exercise, I think, that will help wrap your brains around this. So imagine that I have 1,000 quarters. Maybe I give everyone in this room a quarter, and we do an experiment with those 1,000 quarters where I have you all flip them, right? And then you get heads or tails, 50-50 chance. And then we report the data back, and I add it all up. I mean, of course, the hypothesis is that we would get 50% heads, 50% tails, each time. Well, in reality, if we did the experiment, we'd probably get some variation. We might, on the first time, get 490 heads and 510 tails, or maybe something more drastic. But on average, they would cluster around this 50%, right? Well, now imagine instead of having 1,000 quarters, I want to redo this experiment using only 5 quarters. So now I give 5 students 5 quarters, we do the same thing again, flipping heads or tails, and what are the outcomes? Maybe first time we flip them and we get 3 heads and 2 tails, okay. Second time we flip them, we get 4 tails and 1 head, okay. But by the 5th or 6th time of you doing this, chances are you're gonna get a generation that comes up all heads or all tails. And what that means is that if you get a generation that comes up all dominant alleles, then the recessive allele is extinct, right? Because if I have a generation that randomly occurred that only has 1 allele, how's the allele isn't there ever going to come back? It's not. So that's what we mean when we say an allele goes to fixation or an allele goes to extinction. It's like when they hit the top and bottom of this graph. This is much more common in populations that are very small, right? Big population, it's going to stay around average. Small populations, it drifts. So yeah, it's a random change in allele frequencies due to chance events. There's a couple of key takeaways. One is that it's unbiased, so allele frequencies are equally likely to go up or down. It's random, right? So you could have one simulation where the alleles go this way, one where they go that way, doesn't really matter. The result is that it causes genetic variation to be lost. Alleles are going extinct left and right? So variation in this population is gonna decrease. It can even cause genetically similar populations to become more different, right? If I have two populations separated by a river or a mountain or something, they're small populations, chances are they're going to drift in different directions and lead to speciation. It could even result in rare alleles sometimes becoming more common, even if they're deleterious. Some examples of drift that you might have heard about already are the bottleneck effect and founder's effect. There's an example of this in humans, so that is polydactyly in the Pennsylvania Amish. So polydactyly in this group is many times more common than in other groups of European descent. This is because this population was founded by approximately 200 German immigrants in the early 1700s. Of course, now it's much larger. But polydactyly is caused by a mutation that was present in this founding population, and it was carried by, I don't know how they traced it back to these individuals, but either Anna or Samuel must have had polydactyly. So this is an example of founder's effect, where we have this population starting out with some weird wonky allele frequency, and that manifests like over time. Any questions about drift? No? Okay. Last one we're going to do is gene flow. So what is gene flow? Gene flow is the movement of individuals that changes gene frequencies in a population, or we call this migration. Not all migration is gene flow, but all gene flow needs migration. Kind of works like that. Why do we think migration might affect allele frequencies in a population? Does anyone have an idea? What would migrating do to allele frequencies? Or why? Yeah? Yeah, absolutely. For those of you guys that maybe didn't hear, she said if an allele is more common in one population compared to another, and individuals from that population move, right, they're probably going to bring that allele with them. You're exactly right. Why would we see differences in allele frequencies across populations? Well, back to our friend the pocket mouse, right? If you look at this graph, here's the lava rock in black, right? Or it's dark green, but it indicates the black lava rock. And then around it is the light rock or like sandy color. So if we look at the frequency of the melanic allele, we see that in the populations in the light rock, as we would expect, have lower frequency. Populations around the black lava rock have high frequency, vice versa. So you can imagine that this is because, of course, yes, selection is acting in these populations. Predators are picking up these mice left and right, and you get some alleles being more common over here than over here. But migration allows alleles to flow back and forth between populations. So it actually decreases the ability for organisms or populations to speciate because you're like mixing them together all the time. Another example of this is this Buna cichlid. It's an example of African cichlids, an incredibly speciose clade of teleos fish. These are endemic to Lake Malawi, this one right here in Africa. And they come in these two different flavors, right? So you have on one side of the lake, blue population of these fish. They look like this. On the other side of the lake, maybe there's different environmental or selective pressures, and you have a red phenotype. Okay, but we know that these populations or color morphs of these cichlids often hybridize. So what happens when they do that? Well, this affects allele frequency because now there are more red alleles in the blue population. What does that look like? Maybe this guy's got a red fin here. Where'd that come from? Or you could have more blue alleles in the red population, which usually darker colors are dominant, so I think that's what that would look like. These are, hybridized. Quick caveat, right? This is different than founder's effect, right? So you're like, wait a minute, wouldn't founder's effect just be an example of migration and gene flow? Well, no, right? Gene flow is specifically when you have movement to populations that are already existing. Whereas founder's effect is when people move, they migrate, but they establish a new population. So it's a little different. Gene flow exists in humans. Has anyone done 23andMe by chance? No, one person? Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, there's some issues with it, but I think it's really cool. I think it's worth it. But you guys, if you've seen this, it's like the Ancestry.com thing. You spit in a tube, you send it off, they sequence your DNA, and then they tell you, where your ancestors were. So I'm like, oh, great, neat idea. You watch these commercials, and it's people giving their testimonials, like, oh, I never thought my ancestors were from Kazakhstan, or were this obscure place. Like, crazy, I connected to someone on the other side of the globe. So I do it, right? I'm excited to see, like, wow, I wonder what secrets, like, my ancestry, like, hold. Landon, you are 99.8% European. Northeastern European, or Northwestern European, sorry. So it's like, yeah, okay, great. If you guys do this, I'm sure you'll have better luck, right? Maybe you'll have, really rich, diverse genetic backgrounds. Me, on the other hand, I don't, but it is what it is. So if that wasn't bad news, which it's not, it's whatever. But they do different reports. It's like, Landon, you have more Neanderthal DNA than 93% of our other customers. Ouch, right? How much Neanderthal DNA is this? Not much, Typically on average, it's around 1 to 2% of your entire genetic makeup, thankfully. Which is average for people of European or Asian descent, but interestingly, individuals from African populations usually have close to 0 Neanderthal DNA. Why would that be? Well, it's because Neanderthals lived in Europe, right? Like last ice age, Neanderthals were a species of our genus that moved into Europe way before humans, Homo sapiens, stepped out of Africa, right? So Neanderthals were living up here. As humans migrated out of Africa, they encountered Neanderthals and the populations mixed. This is an example of gene flow. So some of those alleles and variants of Neanderthals actually persist today, especially in members, or especially in people that are of European ancestry. So yeah, given my extensive European ancestry, it's kind of not a surprise that I have a lot of Neanderthal variants. Okay, let's do another Instapoll. In which of the following cases would you expect to see the highest genetic divergence between populations over time? So take a look at these, take maybe 2 minutes, and then we'll talk about it together. Yeah. Open that one. Okay, I kind of got to push a little bit so we don't run out of time. If you could go ahead and maybe, wait, 5 seconds, enter your answers, hurry. I want to give you a fair warning. Okay, can you close it? Anyone want to say what they put for this Instapoll question? See hands? Do you have time to answer it? What did you think? Someone said C in the back? Yeah, C's right. So, if birds are at Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, no evolution, right? No, you wouldn't expect high genetic differences between populations that are at equilibrium. Populations in which male frogs are more likely to be eaten by bats through their mating calls, that might be the case, but if the populations are the same in this regard, then yeah, what's driving this difference? But several extremely small populations of elephants with no natural selection. I kind of put this here to like be a little tricky, but yeah, keyword extremely small populations of elephants are going to diverge from each other. Why? Not because of selection, not because someone's out there like, killing different elephants depending on what size they are or something. It's just because they have a small population. So the effects of drift kind of take over. One more for you guys, if you could open the next one. There is a large population of organisms. 10 females and 2 males wander off and join another large population. This is an example of which of the following? Should be pretty straightforward. Maybe like 10 more seconds. Okay, close. Anyone want to say what this is? Yeah. Gene flow. And you would be right. Gene flow. Yep, that's that one. So I want to leave you with this, guys, before we head out. So why doesn't natural selection produce a perfect organism? Well, evolution is limited by historical constraints, right? So you see all of these different, limbs of tetrapods, right? We're constrained by what evolution has to work with, right? We can't make a perfect organism, like design it brand new. We got to work with what we got. Oftentimes, adaptations are compromises. So more than one selective pressure can be acting at once, and natural selection is both on account of selection on one hand and random chance events on the other. So, yeah. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry I was late for the class. I had a DMV appointment.
Oh, no worries. I didn't even notice.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
And also, so like I only missed one of the Instaple questions because I was late. So would I have to do the Instaple makeup again? Like because I did the last 3, and there's only one that I missed. So should I just do the Instaple makeup for that one question?
I think so. I'm sorry, I'm not exactly hip with. Thank you. I'm not exactly like sure how that works, but yeah, can you do them like question by question, or do you have to do the whole thing?
I don't know. There wasn't really anything. Like it just said like Instaple makeup, like do the questions that you missed or something like.
Oh yeah, yeah. Then you could probably just do that.
All right.
No problem. Of course.
Also, I'm not sure if this is like kind of unrelated, but you know the photos that you were showing of the fish brain from yesterday?
Yeah.
Can you like post them? Like on the Canvas page by any chance? I kind of want to like look at them a little more.
Yeah, I can totally do that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like where I would post them. I can ask Ruth, and then I can maybe send out an announcement of like where exactly those files are. But yeah, cool.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Hi. What's up?
Which days and times do you have the discussion section?
God. Yeah, I'm like, let me remember. So Wednesday 2 to 3. That's in PMA 7. Hold on, I gotta cheat. Sorry.
Okay, so you're good. 2 to 3.
So yeah, I do Wednesday 2 to 3, PMA 7.124. Also on Wednesday 4 to 5 in GDC 5.304. And then on Thursday I have 2 more, 2 to 3 in Garrison 1.28. And then there's one other one. Oh, right here. Yeah, PMA 3:30 to 4:30 on Thursday and PMA 1.5.120. I can email this to you if you want. It's like a little confusing. What's your email?
What's your email? Oh, Harika, Harika dot Cantarla, KANCHARLA at utexas.edu.
Texas.edu. Yeah, it popped up. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. See you guys.
Have a great day.
It was a good lecture today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks again. I went a little faster this time.
I noticed, I was.
Maybe a little too fast. I gotta hit that sweet spot. It's hard every time.
That's okay, I enjoyed it. And I'm gonna take that fourth question and add it on to our. Oh, your things or your.
Yeah, I'm like, I need that later.